So, good evening and welcome. It's time to start the discussion. Thank you very much for coming and being interested in this public discussion about the cultural politics. And first of all, let me welcome our guests from Vienna, Katrin Haag and Nikolaus Schaffhausen from the Kulturált Wien. Thank you for accepting the invitation of ACAX and being here. And let me introduce you guys. And the other participants of this discussion will be Barnabás Bencsik, director of the Ludwig Museum until yesterday, and János Szabolcsai, who's going to be the moderator of this discussion, and he is the head of department at the University of Fine Arts. So thank you again for coming, and I really hope that the discussion will be more focused than the last 2 minutes.
Good evening, welcome to Ludwig Museum of Contemporary Art. This is a public discussion organized by ACAX or ACAX. My pronunciation is not quite well. My name is János Szabolcsai. I'm going to be the moderator of this discussion tonight. We plan it for 1.5 hours, 90 minutes approximately. But before starting the discussion, let me show you this image. That was produced by myself this midday. But it's not about you, Barnabás, it's about contemporary art policy in Hungary. So I read an article in a newspaper in the Index expressing that Barnabás Bencsik was fired by the government, and I know the situation is different this afternoon, so things speeded up now. So the reason I'm showing you this image is that to explain how I feel and how I react, and to understand my motivation to be here and talk about cultural policy tonight. So this is not valid anymore because Barnabás Bencsik is at the Ludwig Museum still. Let me introduce the speakers of this event. Katrin Haag. She studied information technology and media science and art history, and she worked as curator assistant to Kunsthaus Zürich, or Art Unlimited and Art Basel, and she's a member of professional organizations, as you see. And at the moment, she works as a curator for Kunsthalle Wien since 2008. Nikolaus Schaffhausen, he studied art history and worked as an artist before he started his work as a curator. And he worked for Künstlerhaus Stuttgart and Frankfurter Kunstverein. He was curator of the Nordic Institute of Contemporary Art in Helsinki, and he established an institution called European Kunsthalle in Köln. And he was, between 2006 and 2012, the leader of Witte de Wit Center in Rotterdam, the Netherlands. And he works as a strategic director for Fogo Island Arts, which is a Canadian initiative. And he 2 times was the curator of the German pavilion at the Venice Biennale, as you see. And since 2012, he works as a director for Kunsthalle Wien. I found the quotation on the internet on Nikolaus Schaffhausen. This text is all from Andreas Majlát-Pokorny, who is the executive city councillor of cultural affairs at the city of Vienna. He says, "With Nikolaus Schaffhausen, we have succeeded in bringing one of Europe's most successful artistic director, curator and manager to Vienna. He has shown in many ways that he has an eye for the new developments and an instinct for new talent, and that he is able to promote them accordingly. He has headed several art institutions in the past and has the necessary leadership skills and experience for the position at Kulturált. It seems that a public servant, a politician, has a clear vision on the mission of contemporary art organization, Kulturált Museum. This is quite normal, or should be quite normal, but in the context of this conversation, I think it was worth to show you a very positive example. Barabás Bencsiko, you know, and instead of explaining his previous occupations, just let me quote myself, because this is my text. He has been a leading force of contemporary art since the middle of 90s. Worked for the Studio Gallery, the SCCA, Trafo Gallery, Műcsarnok, MEO, Dimo, Acax. His personal story covers the institutional story and cultural policy of Hungary during the last 2 decades. He has always been dedicated to international integration of contemporary art from this culture, and as the leader of Ludwig Museum, he established a remarkable position for it in the region. In the morning, when I woke up, I was thinking on the position of this old gentleman, and then I was thinking about the position of the other gentleman. To explain to our friends from Vienna, the second person is the new chairman of the National Bank. That is the very last position which was not occupied by the government until today, or yesterday. So things speeded up. But you read the news and you know that Barabás' position has expired, but there's no public announcement for the position, as I wrote it in the morning. This afternoon, you know, the position was announced. And there's new director appointed yet. We'll see. The Hungarian subtitle of this event is Kulturált, kultúrpolitika. It is, how can I translate? Kulturált, sophisticated cultural policy, gentle cultural policy, polite cultural policy. So everything is but the communication of the government of today. You see the decision makers of cultural policy in Hungary, former Secretary of State. It's not fun. If you just see these gentlemen, it's a very important list of names and bunch of faces. Check it out. And ask yourself, or ask themselves, where to find policy? Who is the policy maker? Who is the policy holder? Can you answer that question? Actually, what is policy? Very briefly, let me introduce, let me just make some point before we start the conversation. These entries are from English dictionary. What is policy? Policy is a definite course of method of action, selected from among alternatives, and in light of given conditions to guide and determine present and future decisions. Or, policy is a high-level overall plan, embracing the general goals and acceptable procedures, especially a government body. I collected some definitions for public policy. The last one is my favorite. Public policy is what governments actually do and why. There's concept and there's practice, there's method to implement. Okay, from public policy, we very quickly arrive to cultural policy. This is a new definition for public policy. Public policy is a course of action taken by public authorities to address a given problem or interrelated set of problems. Let's play this game and let's substitute public authorities and other words in this definition. So cultural policy, by my definition here, is a course of action taken by public authorities, in this case the Ministry of Human Resources, the government of Hungary, to address a given problem or interrelated set of problems. What is the problem? Who, what, why, and how should be financed by public funding? In Hungary, as you know, but maybe for Katrin and Nicholas it can be interesting that the tradition of Hungarian cultural policy is a monopolized cultural policy. Financing culture is monopolized by the state. At the same time, the state controls cultural development. At the moment, no efficient and effective contribution by private sector in Hungary. And there's no highly developed non-profit economy, which can be a basis of a new cultural policy. Well, there are some examples for tax relief, tax consideration to donate from private sector to cultural sector, but this is limited to performing arts and film industry only. And even corporations run CSR programs, corporate social responsibility programs. The current regulations of tax do not motivate them to support museums or art organizations. So, briefly, let's summarize what's going on in Hungary in terms of public policy. A totally new concept and praxis is being implemented for public policy nowadays. I mean, last 2.5 years. Restructurization of state administration, reorganization of public health, superannuation funds, higher education and culture, centralization of public institutions, public media, of course, is controlled by the government. Expertise, any kind of expertise in general, is not as appreciated by the government. What is the result? The democratic institutions, the system of checks and balances has been weakened. What about cultural policy? What are the current trends in Hungary in cultural policy? On one hand, there are serious cuts in budgets of museums operated by the state, everybody knows that. Just like everybody in Europe, actually. 2, nationalization of museums formerly operated by city councils, which is a highly problematic step taken by the government. On the level of municipalities, because Hungary doesn't equal Budapest only, most of the self-governance, the cultural committees of country towns, consider museums and cultural organizations as unnecessary, unwanted institutions that should not be funded by public money. And of course, you know that harsh discourse is taking place on the positions of contemporary art and the role of its institutions in this society. And these arguments from both sides are often politically motivated and overloaded. As expertise is not appreciated, the government doesn't discuss and does not negotiate with art associations and experts. The policies and programs for the reorganization are not based on public nor professional debate. So the concept for the current reconstruction of the country is not developed in terms of long-term impact and sustainability. And the last point, the Hungarian Art Academy became a public body, as stated by the new constitution, edited and codified by the government, that enjoys 2/3 majority in the parliament. This academy doesn't support critical art or national art. Even officially it is not confirmed. The academy may intend to influence art education and policy of National Cultural Fund. Okay, we protest a lot. We launch petitions, organizing public demonstrations, but there's no substantive reaction by the government yet. So, I'm very happy to welcome you here, and we would like to talk about the principles of cultural policy in the Netherlands, Switzerland, Germany, and Austria, very briefly. And we are very curious how politicians and decision makers define the function and role of contemporary art organizations in these societies. So the question is how representatives and leaders of political parties relate to contemporary art and its institutions. How the programming of public contemporary art institutions is dependent or independent from government, city councils, what are the expectations, rules, feedback, communication, interventions, criticism, collaboration, and so on. The structure of this conversation should be based on the following steps. Let's see economy, public policy, public administration, and cultural policy. And we have like more than an hour. And please use the mic.
I don't know. Should I read my statement? It's a bit, but it's a bit more. It's a little bit. Yeah, hello. It's a 20-minute statement, but probably I should do it because I think after. But I will stand there. Otherwise, I cannot. So I can read quick because I don't want to interfere in your time frame here and how you try to do the scale about what we have to talk about tonight. I think it's an extremely complex topic. First of all, especially since January 2012, you mentioned it already. I used to work that was my main job for 6 years in the Netherlands, in Rotterdam, heading the Witte Institute for Contemporary Art over there. It's and the Netherlands changed the culture, not only the cultural politics, the whole educational sector, the science sector and the cultural sector as such, changed dramatically in those 6 years of my tenure in the Netherlands. Just one, and I think it has, that would interest me to talk about it later, I think it has a lot to do with the popularization of contemporary art and culture as such in Europe in the last 25 years. Okay, I start with my statement. So I worked on it a little bit in the train. So this is also why I couldn't print this, and I'm a little bit late. I'm very sorry for this. So I want to start by telling you an anecdote from my childhood. My grandfather, Tony, Opa Tony, used to read me fairy tales when I was little. Invariably, halfway through, as a child, I would start to scream and cry and protest at the cruelty of what he was telling me. And fairy tales can be quite cruel, as I'm sure you all know. One day, having grown very tired of my dramatic reactions, Opa Tony hit on a plan, and I never can forget about this. He decided to tell me the end of the story of the fairy tale first, because, as you know, fairy tales do usually have a happy ending. So, then, somehow pacified, I would eagerly listen to the tale itself, secure in the knowledge that whatever horror was going on, I was sure that it will turn out okay in the end. Lately, and that is, you saw my CV, as I'm doing what I'm doing now, if I include my so-called artistic career, which was rather short, just 5 years, but I'm working in that field. I've never done anything else in my life since 25 years. So, and I'm the director of various institutions since 20 years. So I started fairly young, I think. Lately, I often have thought of Opa Tony's tactic when considering the various horror scenarios that the new breed of politicians, and you mentioned it briefly, it's not only a Hungarian phenomenon, but to me, looking to Hungary as an outsider, not speaking Hungarian, it has also a lot to do with the isolation, to me, with the isolation of the language. And I used to work in the language group. In the Netherlands and Dutch, it's a small language group as well. And of course, like here as well, all people speak English, but what they changed in the Netherlands, it was almost a bilingual country, English and Dutch. English was almost the official language. This is forbidden now, you know. People have to speak in the public sectors, in public museums, in public institutions, in universities, and etc., unless it's not a European or an international course. It's Dutch again. It's also a little bit isolation. So all the horror scenarios that the new breed of politicians in Europe are inflicting, not only on the art institutions in their countries, but on the cultural sector as a whole. I really wish I knew that everything would end well, then I would have might not to scream and shout. But unfortunately, I have the dark suspicion that we are currently seeing in the currently seeing in the political arena will not lead to a happy ending at all. So I feel from deep in my heart that we must scream and protest after all. And I think we all don't have, no one of us has ideas how to scream and protest in that tiny field we are all working in. We shouldn't forget that contemporary arts, contemporary culture as such, it's extremely popular in the media, but not for people who vote, probably, to put it like this. It is hardly necessary we'll get a little bit more abstract later also, but I don't have a practical solution, but now I'll run through it. It is hardly necessary to defend the position that the arts as well as the sciences represent privileged forms of investigating our world. This has always been the case. Artists, and I think we should talk about art, artists, their mediators, and the public consider this activity necessary precisely because of its inherent value. But this is not today's topic. It is the year 2013, and an example, and I looked up the Netherlands last night, what all happened there since my departure, a little bit more than a year ago. Half of the institutions are gone in these countries now, and it has since January 1st, 2013, from the cultural sector, 150,000 direct employees work for the cultural sector in the Netherlands, and 50,000 are now unemployed, in between a couple of months. This is so in the Netherlands. Politicians in the Netherlands see no value in what intellectual in question marks, cultural, so-called, how they call it, niches, provides to their own country. Why is that the case? The answer is actually very simple. What we have for decades lived and understood as democracy, and I cannot talk about Hungary, but in the Western realm of Europe, I can do it, I lived in some countries there, for decades lived and understood as democracy no longer exists. The role of the state is no longer, and that I think is very important, to foster a society characterized by difference, but rather to produce a population, and with all the material I got here for research from Hungary, and I think this is completely the same, but to produce a population that is economically efficient and uniform as possible, a population in which the otherness, and you see all the papers I got, all the discussions which are going on, the anti-Semitism, the state of homosexuality in this country, and etc. Otherness is seen only as a source of disruption, and insisting on arts, otherness, is in no way the expression of a romantic concept of art, which seeks to define art as a reservoir of the beautiful, the sensual, or the irrational. On the contrary, to insist on art's otherness, it is absolutely rational. In the course of their reflections of the theory of art, which you all know, philosophers like Adorno, Niklas Luhmann, up to Jacques Rancière have, in one way or another, insisted that art creates difference and that it is distinct from society's other functional systems. I'm saying this because I don't think that we can only talk about a functional system anymore. This means that it cannot be evaluated according to the criteria such as those provided by economics. The insistence on art's independence and difference, in other words, art for art's sake, it's incompatible with the idea and demands of politicians. In recent decades, public funding, and you said it as well, in Europe is everywhere happening, even in the very rich niche of Austria, public funding has contributed to the foundation of cultural institutions and democracy as such. Cultural institutions have been and remain a source of admiration abroad and have helped to communicate a positive, urbane, liberal and modern image of Europe to the rest of the world, especially in the past 25 years. Art production and art history are deeply interwoven within the fabric, the very essence of our society. Art has shaped our society we live in like almost no other discipline, and to attack and ridicule it as an entire discipline, and this is how I understand as an outsider the Hungarian situation, is to attack and ridicule the essence of our society itself. This is, of course, unacceptable. Those politicians, also the people you mentioned and you showed there, it's not only that you look different, yeah? But those politicians, political positions are only possible because they can be certain that contemporary art and contemporary culture has no clout among the majority of the populace. The particular underhand strategy that is typical of populist politics, the other, again, is debased in order to strengthen the sense of community, the sense of us among the masses. If, for example, this was, also, I did a little bit of research about the health system here, health security system. I found a very nice example as to how nice they are to of those health, social insurance, and values, etc. If, for example, an undersecretary of the state or of the Department of Public Health were to mine the work of nurses, doctors, and other healthcare providers, like they do it with you or with your colleagues, I'm certain that he or she would immediately be fired. Why can you do it with, somehow, if you are as an employee from the public sector, so it's very strange, so that we get criticized for this, what we have to offer. A nurse never got through it, so yeah. The current political climate is characterized by a deeply deterministic approach that has, by definition, no interest in any kind of critical, curatorial, artistic or cultural practice. In fact, we are fast approaching a situation where the very idea of critique and its inherently open and underdetermined character are seen as serious threats to kind of static society envisioned by a growing part of the political establishment. We clearly have to re-evaluate our definition as curators or workers in the cultural field and perception of artistic and curatorial practice. But at this point I want to make very clear here, we are also the witness of an enormous and important cultural legacy, as we shouldn't get lost in only talking about what we are missing. The complex relationship between art history and public life is an integral part of the tradition of our society. I've always seen this as a very core of my job and want to impress it also for this panel here. I think it's our responsibility to keep this tradition alive. Most visibly in the conceptual art since the 1960s, the development of theory has been part of the art world. And it's only for this reason that those places like this museum here, in example, appeared at the first place. Probably should think also back where where we are coming from. We are not coming from only public funding. The institution as a part community center, part laboratory, and part academy, may be a thing of the recent past, but its various components remain a permanent part of our directors in curatorial everyday work. Education departments have been particularly active in developing diverse models designed to engage new segments of the public and to make art somewhat more accessible. In addition, institutions' potential to create a public sphere has been recognized. Their potential to act as substitute for the other spaces that have become more and more subject to the process of universal commercialization are not longer inclusive I think, but exclusive. This also implies that various institutional formats clearly represent potential areas, the positive legacy of the white cube, also where are we doing things, in which things can happen that no longer happen elsewhere. That I think, probably I'm completely naive, but this is probably the chance of those institutions working under such conditions, like in Hungary or in the Netherlands. We'll skip a bit. It is very ironic that we have frequently been the agents with our jobs, the agents of our own demise. All over Europe, governments, and it's very direct here in Hungary, but governments are creating agencies that are models on independent and critical institutions. An example, in the Netherlands, the former Mondrian foundations, now called Mondrian funds, and is not stimulating, not giving stipends anymore, as an example, for 5,000 or 10,000 euros to an individual artist. Now they give stipends for the huge film production of 500,000 euros. Yeah? Not anymore this, or the German Bundeskulturstiftung in German, the institution for, it's a state-funded cultural institution which is only operating with huge budgets now. They're just creating their own programs. These new institutions work under the same mechanisms, however, there is one crucial difference of the same mechanisms like a museum, independent museum or art center. They're not even nominally independent. That is a huge difference. Yeah. But directly under political control. And I will leave it to your own deduction to consider how truly independent, and for the visitors, for lots of normal visitors, at first it looks independent. But they are definitely more effective than independent institutions in terms of visitor numbers, PR mechanisms, and of course influence in schools and for the entire educational system. Now, the situation is that art institutions are no longer rejected by the artists themselves, which is of course it's a very interesting history. No? All artists who are always fighting against art institutions are no longer rejected by artists themselves, but are actually being aligned by their social and political surroundings, which try to repress cultural and knowledge production. And this results, which is a general fear and the danger, is to it's mediocrity. In this situation, and I come now to an end, in this situation, the role of institutions such as this one here becomes even more crucial. In order to be able to function independently, we must seek new alliances with individuals, or private individuals, and of course also enterprises. And I know that this is not easy in an economic situation like this one. But these alliances will be more fluid in the end than the old state-managed system, and there will be even more, probably more disappointments and failed expectations on both sides. But these alliances are likely to be more brittle and will have to be renewed more often. Just as we are now faced with deterministic expectation and demands from the political arena, so we will be faced with the same demands from other sectors, but probably more diverse. But it's in a very far away from being a neoliberal. But this, I think, is the only chance. As coming from the Netherlands, I know that in Austria it's a complete different system. And indeed, we have something to offer. Yeah, that's just in a way as a file, a little addition for you.
Yeah, maybe. It's quite difficult for me now to add something to this quite very elaborated statement. So Well, since I was asked for to maybe just a little bit, or is that too early to speak also a little bit about all the context? Okay. No, in any case, I'm aware that the discussion tonight will lead to a certain degree in the direction of to quite be critical against the state, the role of the state in subsidizing art and art field and the art mediation. At the same time, I think it's also, we are talking about responsibility in a way, so this definitely cannot be only the state's role, as we see can lead in a very problematic field. On the other hand, it's all not, also, I have to say, it cannot be only the role of the private sector to, as it might be the case in the US, to feel responsible for the cultural field and philanthropic mission. So I'm making, so to say, a plaidoyer for the middle way. But however, we'll see where the discussion will lead us tonight. But in the course of preparation for tonight, I was going through some articles about Hungarian situation, and I was highly irritated by different factors, but especially one, that the parliament is making more and more functioning as a structure to decide about new rules, how to say it? New laws, yes, new laws. And also about laws about in the cultural field. And so this made me think about, but what's the role, is the role of fine arts and arts at large somehow rooted, and that was also a question, preparatory question from your side, in the constitution.